topic of the day today is all about AI leading revenue operations and how sales teams are getting superpowers. I am Matthew Volm, the CEO and founder of RevOps Co-op, a global community of 17,000 plus revenue operators from all across the globe. We have a variety of membership options. If you are not in the community, you can see all of the membership options we have on our website, revopscoop.com. We have a free option along with some other more premium options. Go check us out. A lot of other things available there too, from in-person events to digital events like these. We do conferences. We have courses and education available. So go check those things out. But I am with a couple of people who are a lot smarter on this topic of AI than I am. And so I'm going to quickly introduce them, allow them to say a little bit more about themselves, and then I'm going to pull up the slides and the content we have available and kind of get started on this. So I have Jacob Fleisher with me, who is the head of sales over at Attention, and Jeremy von Halle, who is the VP of Revenue Operations and Chief of Staff to the CCO over at Abridge. Jeremy, as we were just talking, but I really wanted to get it all out. So gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for joining. Jacob, I actually want to ask you first, one, add anything to that personal and professional introduction, but then I typically always like to ask one non-work related question to just get us rolling, provide a little insight into like who you are outside of the professional world. And so I guess my question, I'm going to ask you first since Jeremy's our guest here, right? So he'll have a little bit more time. So tell us more about yourself, like professionally, but then I also want to know personally of like, what's one thing that you've either got planned, maybe it's a vacation, I don't know, something for the month of August that excites you the most before we start to get into like September, October, and like all the year end sort of stuff.
Yeah, great to meet everyone. I am Jacob, the head of sales at Attention. Professionally, I was actually the sixth employee here a little over almost 2.5 years ago. I'm helping bring the product to market, and now fast forward 2 years later, leading sales, have a team of 11 right now that's actually doubling, and our company is now right about 60 employees and also growing really, really quickly. So really excited. Always has been in sales, had a quick stint through a tech pivot into consulting, which is in blockchain, which is a funny story for another time. What I have coming up. So I actually July was my super busy month. 2 weeks ago, I was in Europe. I was in France and Spain. August is a little more on the chiller side for me. I'm a groomsman in a wedding coming up. So I'm going to be in Montreal for a bachelor party and then just laying low and enjoying the extreme heat of New York City.
Yeah. That's awesome. I've never been to Montreal, but I've heard very, very good things. All right, Jacob, thank you for being here, my friend. Jeremy, tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then same question to you. What do you got going on in August that has you the most excited to round out the summer?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Jeremy von Halle, VP of Revenue Operations at Abridge. For those don't know Abridge is generative AI for clinical conversations. So everything from when you first walk into the doctor's office and you've noticed that your primary care physician has been looking at the computer more than they look at you, we help automate all of their clinical documentation all the way through rev cycle and billing. It's been a fun ride over the past year and a half, and we're now in over 150 of the largest health systems, including many that are probably local to you all, whether it's Kaiser out in California, as well as many other regions, or even places like Duke or University of Chicago, where I'm located, which is in Chicago. In terms of upcoming travel, we are doing a quick family trip with my wife's family to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. So excited to spend some time there. My 3-year-old loves the pool, so it'll be a good time.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is Lake Geneva, quite the popular destination for Chicagoland folks during the summer. Before we get into this, Jeremy, are you a baseball fan at all?
Yes, they've just been having the
Cubs or White Sox?
I'm a North Sider, so Cubs, but
okay. Assuming you watched my Brewers beat up on you guys last night then.
Actually, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, you've pushed that out
I was selective tuning into.
All right. The game hasn't started yet today, and so we'll see what happens. I can talk a big game for the Brewers right now, but we can talk baseball later. So let's move into the AI part of this conversation. What we want to talk about today is how revenue operations is really becoming this proving ground for real scalable AI impact. I've talked about this a lot where for me, I see revenue operations as sitting at the center of people, process, and technology, and AI being in the same spot. And RevOps is really perfectly positioned to have a significant impact and really own all of these AI initiatives that are happening at every company that is meant to drive positive revenue outcomes, from some of the things we have listed here, streamlining sales workflows to boosting forecasting accuracy. And so today we're going to get into some specific examples on how RevOps teams are doing this. We're going to dive into some of the details. We're going to talk specifically about these three different buckets here, focused on the sales side. So productivity and rep proficiency is the first thing we'll get into. We'll move on to manager proficiency then as well. Arguably, sales and frontline managers are some of the most important people on the sales side, and then also get into some of the leadership insights and data that's needed to scale. As I mentioned, anyone that has questions, comments, feedback as we go through this, drop them in the chat or the Q&A, because we're going to be taking things as we go. So I'm going to actually get started with a quick poll here, and let me just launch this poll. So I'm curious where everyone is, and we're curious where everyone is around AI adoption, and a couple of different buckets asking you to, pick one of these answers, right? If you haven't started, but you want to learn more. Are you kind of exploring testing? Are you implementing AI, but you're not really seeing results? Or, are you on the other side of the equation and you're fully implemented and seeing results? I'm going to let this run for a little bit longer, but I guess, Jeremy, where would you land on this poll as a
Yeah.
revenue operator?
Yeah, I think we're in a fairly unique situation given that we're an AI native company. So we've been really challenging ourselves to, I think the proper term is dog food, our own technology and AI in general. So we are probably further along on the adoption curve, which has been really exciting. Tons of lessons and key learnings there, and not everything's been fully fleshed out, but we've definitely implemented a host of solutions and are seeing some really awesome results as a result of it.
Yeah. Jacob, what are you seeing from your customers?
Yeah, I think from our customers, it's kind of funny. You get like a big mixed bag, and I don't think there's any like direct signal yet of like who is or who isn't an adopter. I would say most organizations that I talk to are somewhere between exploring testing to like thinking about implementation. I think it's, at least today, it's rare to see like fully implemented, seeing full results. I think that's like still like someone like Abridge is, and right, they're very forward thinking, being a native Gen AI company. But I would say somewhere between exploring and implementing is like the most common of what we're seeing in the market right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looks like, I mean, again, sharing the results here, a lot of people here at least are in that exploring testing phase. And yeah, Jeremy, one thing I'll mention, you mentioned like dog fooding your own product. I like to always say drinking your own champagne.
I worked for a human grade dog food startup back in the day, so I was actually forced to eat my own dog food.
Oh my God. All right. We have a lot more to learn about Jacob, everyone, but I don't think we have enough time to get into that and all of the AI discussions today. So, all right, again, that'll be for our next one, Jacob. But let's actually, on that note, Jacob, let's talk a little bit about kind of what we have here around productivity and rep proficiency, some of the focus areas, what that can lead to. Why don't you go ahead and get us started on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we're seeing as the hot topic today is how do we make our reps more productive? Like a tale old as time, reps are always complaining that they have too much admin work on their plate. And how can we start to live in a world where a lot of this admin work goes away? And I think the first thing you hear from reps is it's always around CRM hygiene, that they don't want to spend the time updating the CRM if they have 5, 6, 7 calls in a day. The last thing they want to do when the clock hits 6 or 7 p.m. is go into Salesforce, go into HubSpot, and start going through calls, typing in notes, and then having to write their follow-up emails and follow up with all their prospects and customers. So one really big application for AI we've seen is being able to automate a lot of those admin tasks, right? Whether it be automatically filling all of your custom fields in your CRM, or being able to write custom follow-up emails that are drafted in people's inboxes to just hit send on. I also think you see a lot of other more niche productivity gains. Like, for example, a lot of our AEs operate in Google Tasks. One of our AEs has an agent that runs for him that every day looks at all his calls and creates all of his Google Tasks for the following day, right? So how do they currently operate, and how do you augment and automate that for them so they're not spending time doing information gathering, collection, and entry? it was just streamlined into what their process and day-to-day looks like.
Yeah. And Jeremy, how does that compare to either things that you're doing at Abridge or what you're seeing on the operator side?
Y- Yeah, there's a couple ways that I like to approach this type of technology. The use case has to be like compelling enough and good enough that they'll actually want to use it and it feels helpful. The bar that we have is like, are they just going to go right into ChatGPT and just do it themselves versus like start to build into their actual workflow? Like, what does that inflection point look like to make sure that it's ultimately useful at the end of the day? The second thing that I look for is like, what are some incredible win-wins that we could have that are like great for the rep and great for the operators as well? So like, how can we build things that allow reps to be able to be more efficient, but then also give the company greater insight into what's happening? So attention's been able to kind of allow us to feed and turn like one conversation into multiple outputs. So we could have, like Jacob mentioned, something that automatically updates your next steps or enables you to flag all of the kind of med pick criteria, continually update that, while at the same time allows us to start to benchmark things like, okay, what is the trend that we're hearing around a new product? What are the things that happen when, you know, it's one of the other things that we've been liking is like try to find some magical moments between customers and our team to figure out what are they excited about and what are they talking about so we can kind of share and reinforce that with the broader organization.
Yeah. And so, Jeremy, on that note, I guess I have a before and after sort of question. So I like the example you gave or the litmus test of saying what's the magical moment that'll get someone to adopt, say the thing that I'm giving them versus just going to ChatGPT or something else. So do you have any specific examples or stories on like things where you've either maybe one where you've been successful with that and maybe one where you haven't been successful? Like what did things look like before when someone was maybe using ChatGPT or not? And what was the kind of the after like for them,
Yeah.
just so people can kind of get a sense for that?
I think from our perspective, there's a lot to glean on a customer call, as there's just a ton of really great information that is typically underutilized. I think for most revenue organizations that I've spoken to or been a part of, like they're like, okay, what is the next step, and what is the pricing or some basic stuff, but like they're not really eager in understanding the full context. To get the full context, though, like all of the medpic requirements, if there's a competitor involved, like what are the other concerns that they have, or like why buy, why now, whatever those kind of considerations are, there's a huge onus on the rep to actually like fill that information out or to make sure that it's actually accurate. I think we've been able to work with attention to like really dial in the underlying prompts that pull in information to make it so easy that it pretty much just populates and they can say, okay, this is all good and ready to go and verify that. When you start to do that stuff where it's like, holy crap, this is really spot on. The other problem that we found was that like sometimes things needed to be based on the prior context that happened.
Oh,
Otherwise, that information would just be static. And a lot of stuff when you're looking at it in a vacuum, it's like, okay, well, did it change? Did it get better? Is it static? Those are the nuances that really matter to a rep and a company that we're able to dial in.
yeah.
I think that's an example of something where it's like, hey, that's really valuable because you can start to dictate, okay, these are the things that we care about that should be looking back in history, and these are the things that are more static that we need to. Then there's other things where we've tried to be like, okay, hey, we're trying to work on how we can generate email copy and things for you. We've struggled with that because, first of all, there's like a time to result factor, which is, hey, there's going to be like trying to do all these things. It's going to take a minute to actually generate the email. That's like, doesn't feel good. It's like they just will go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, write me an email with this, this, and this, and it's way faster. So it's like, okay, how do you balance that, like, the underlying subtle, like the nuance and the context and the tone that you want with the speed and to delivery.
Yeah. And Jacob, you mentioned before about meeting your reps where they are. You gave the specific example of an agent that helps someone on your team create Google tests. So if that's the case for one person and maybe someone else has, a different process, how do you think then about balancing kind of the introduction of new AI tools and technology while also in revenue operations wanting to keep your tech stack focused? And I don't know if lean is the right word, but obviously like the more things you add, the more complex, things get. So how should people be thinking about the gives and takes there?
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to the size of your team on where standardization of process across reps makes sense before automating, right? I'm a believer that you really shouldn't be automating singular tasks for singular reps if you have 30, 40, 50 reps, probably even like 15 or 20 reps. Right now, I have 4 AEs, that's doubling. So I'm trying to kind of meet each rep where they're at in terms of how their workflow is most optimal for them. But when we have 8 reps in, about a month from now, or hopefully faster, I'll probably have to start thinking about how do we standardize, right? We can't have 8 different next step or task agents running. We probably have to come up with a process in which is streamlined across the entire organization. So I think it really comes down to how your team is set up and what their focus is to figure out like where does it make sense to standardize and create automation that fits everyone's workflow, or creating a workflow that is like one-to-one for the reps. Like something like a follow-up email can be very challenging to standardize at a large organization because all of your reps will have their different tactics and strategies on how they like formulating a follow-up email, whether it be just 2 or 3 sentences or a really beefy copy that.
Yeah.
So where does the rubber meet the road there of like, you don't want to take your best reps process and automate something they're not going to use at all, but you do want to support your best rep and automate their work and make them more effective and giving them bandwidth to work more deals. So it is a challenge to figure out where do you standardize, where do you automate? And I think it really just comes down to team by team.
Yeah. And so one of the bullet points on here in terms of leads to is certification and rep coaching. So I guess, and I have 2 questions here. So one, talk a little bit more about certification and rep coaching and what that actually means. And then 2 is I'm curious on, I think in revenue operations, a lot of times we can have the tendency to, right, we build things or we manage all these tools or these systems or like we roll out these processes. But if you think of revenue operations as this kind of product, right, where you're offering it to, people on your sales team, marketing team, CS team, right, at the end of the day, like a lot of times things will happen behind the scenes that your end users may not see, but your end users, the salesperson, will still be impacted, have to use the technology or be impacted by the processes, the things that you roll out. And so I'm curious how reps are actually viewing these tools or changes as well. Are they kind of invisible and they haven't noticed any changes, or are they impacting them in a good way and they're actually giving positive feedback? I'm curious on what the rep experience is like along with the certification and rep coaching.
Who do you want to tackle that
First, Jacob or Jeremy?
I think
Yeah.
from a rep's perspective, the feedback we're getting is like using AI to augment and automate their workflow has been very positive, right? I think there's always fear of introducing a new platform because it just means somewhere else that you need to go and spend your time. When you're thinking about autonomous agents, there's a lot of cases where a rep doesn't even have to go into the platform to have tasks completed for them, right? So if you think about filling the CRM, writing a follow-up, getting Slack to your next steps. That's AI just being implemented into your current process, but automating the things that you don't like doing. So the feedback we get from reps is really great because it's basically taking all of the work they don't like doing and doing it for them. And leadership is really happy because the quality of the outputs for something like a med pick is uniform across the entire organization. And it's also more accurate, right? So you have a clearer understanding of what's actually happening. And then when I think about actually working the deal, right, we talk about leadership having MedPick available, but it's also for the rep, like information access. If they're getting the right information from their conversations, they're going to be able to do better preparation work for their upcoming conversations because they're focused on the right information for that specific deal. So when you think about like building urgency and selling on value, they're operating off of information for that given opportunity that is like highly accurate and actionable versus potentially looking at things they might have missed. So they become a lot more effective as sellers as well, which ultimately puts more cash in their pocket, which we know salespeople love.
Yeah. I like the point you mentioned there around leveraging things like MedPick and the data that's provided. I think the main thing there is we can't forget that ultimately, if we automate the way that data gets collected or into our CRM, for example, that doesn't give anyone the excuse to not look at it or not use it, right? Just because it's automated now in the way that it gets in doesn't mean a human should never set eyes on that. The reason why we collect that information is so that we can use it, right? We can coach people better. The rep can use it to actually sell and qualify and do all the things that they're supposed to do. So we can't, certainly can't forget about that part. Jeremy, what are you seeing around, again, certification, rep coaching?
This is probably one of my favorite use cases that we've done. So we use attention for all of our new hire onboarding and certification programs across all commercial roles, including sales, our customer success, which we call partner success, as well as a few other commercial roles. We center around role actions, which are effectively like here are the key components of our playbook. And a part of the certification process is doing some of those mock calls, which tees up really nicely. We're trying to say to be good at your role, you need to be able to perform these key role actions. And we work with attention to dial on what that scoring process should look like. The benefit is then we've developed a really great QA process, particularly for reps that are onboarding or hiring. When we see deviations, both really positive or negative against our core average, that then alert our enablement team as well as their manager to be like, hey, here's a call that should be checked out for this particular reason. It allows then way more active and proactive mitigation of potential concerns, but also great opportunity for us just to continue to learn and get better at what happens. I like it kind of on both sides. Like, what are some also really great examples of things that we've seen to really highlight? Here's some like best in practice and ways that we can then store that information in a folder for folks to go review as they are onboarding to understand what good looks like. It's been a super streamlined and more data-driven approach to onboarding in general. The other thing that we're starting to do, which I'm really excited about, is our sales is really complex for really upmarket enterprise. It can take a while until you close your first deal, right? How do you understand if a rep's trending in the right direction? We've been able to boil down our core competencies by role into particular prompts as well, and then start to evaluate how reps are doing and holding up against some of those core values with examples, which has also given us more like quantitative data against, a more qualitative measure, which has been really cool as well.
Yeah. And so two questions before we move on to kind of the manager side of this. So one is around, I guess, Jeremy, do you have any specific examples of what CRM hygiene automation you've used and any tools you've leveraged to enable that? So I know one, we talked a little bit about call recordings and all the additional context and stuff that's there. We talked about, again, things like MedPick or if you're spiced or whatever, band and kind of automating like some of the inputs into the CRM. Any other specific examples around CRM hygiene that you're leveraging AI for that you can share?
Yeah, competitive tracking is really big as well. Just understanding which competitors get mentioned and the context around that is really huge. We're also starting to like from a MedPick perspective, it's not just like getting information about the qualification, it's the strength of that. So something that we've done to layer on top of it is to like, and that the MedPick, I would say texture changes as you move the deal further along in the process. Like how you might qualify for metrics might look different as you get later and later stage. So we've developed a way to continually validate that as it moves. So it's not just like getting the information in, it's saying, okay, for these letters, like how strong it is, and then what is the guidance to improve on that. So we started to build that in as an additional layer. And then making sure that we really tie this as a kind of lingua franca across both a rep and a manager perspective. So when they pull up reports, they know how they're looking and evaluating and reviewing their pipelines.
Yeah, Jacob, anything to add on that?
I think a very compelling one that we're using internally is win-loss, right? So have it be trigger-based that when something is marked closed won in the CRM or closed lost in the CRM, an agent can go and analyze all of the emails and conversations to that given opportunity and then fill in a lost reason or a won reason in the CRM. So I think there's a lot of really actionable things. We're also doing a lot of like, it's enabled us to start tracking a lot more data as well. We do competitors through a multi-select pick list. We also do like, why is the competitor in the deal in free text? Use cases through pick lists. Like the amount of fields that we're capturing is way more than I think than an organization that needs it to be done manually because you just don't trust that a rep's going to go and fill out 15 or 20 fields, even though having that data becomes really valuable for your business.
And then
Sometimes we like to have some like gut checks versus human gut checks. So we have a manual next step field, which is something that we require all reps to update continually each week. We also have like an AI generated one too, to allow us to like validate like, okay, what's the computer saying versus the human, just as another gut check and what happens. Some of this helps to just like pressure test certain pipeline and deal stages as well.
Yeah. See, Vivian was asking about the auditing of stuff in the chat. She was using MedPick as an example of like, What are you all doing, Jeremy? Maybe since you just mentioned that, what are you doing? You gave an example of inserting human steps, having a AI step, having the ability to compare the two. Anything else you're doing to make sure that you're confident in the things that AI is producing that you're relying on to make
Yeah.
business decisions and that there's not all these hallucinations happening that
So
you're dependent on?
I think like rule number one is trust and trust but verify. And we say that for everything, even our own tool is like you can certainly trust it, but you should absolutely verify and make sure that there's some type of QA in the process. Certain fields like, certain components within CRM hygiene, some things like require human intervention and need to be manually pushed. So just understanding what stuff you need to make sure that is QA'd appropriately by a human and what stuff you're fine with, as long as it's 90% accurate or directionally accurate, I think will lead to less heartburn around things like hallucinations or incorrect data.
Yeah, Jacob, anything else to add to that before we move on to the manager piece?
Yeah, I think also you can like introduce like human in the loop workflows, right? Where either it's like sending the notes to a rep via Slack to like give the thumbs up or going into a platform and like giving it a read and like manually pressing push. So we definitely have customers and see workflows where it's having human in the loop before entering data into the system of record to like have that added visibility, trust into the data that's going inside.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. And I think, yeah, main things to think about there and to Vivian's last question is like, whose role is it to check or be verified? And I'd say like the answer to that probably depends on the information you're looking to have verified, but it's obviously someone, like if sales ops doesn't have context of the conversation, they should not be the one to like probably have the verification step. But if you're doing a human in the loop where the example you just gave, Jacob, right? Like things are getting, kind of flushed to say the SDR who was in on the conversation. They got to give the thumbs up before it progresses to the next step. That's a good way to have that verification. Think about the risk that Jeremy mentioned, low risk versus medium versus high risk. And then the other thing is like, yeah, again, like keep in mind, for example, like, like the before and after, right? We're talking about with this is like, before AI, you had, like these medpic fields, right, getting populated by, say, the people. Well, how would you verify them then, right? It's like typically, you go, you ask a bunch of questions and like you're continuously basing your decisions on imperfect data. And so, like, hopefully now with the introduction of AI, like nothing's going to be perfect, but the accuracy is going to be much better than, say, the human. And again, that's just where you need to evaluate the risk, the amount of trust you can place in the technology that you're using, and the type of thing that you're using AI for. But yeah, you can't just, full fledged, 100% go in on AI and not have any sort of spot checks or QAs. So we talked about kind of the individual contributor layer a little here, how this is impacting reps and ICs. So I want to talk next about the manager proficiency, manager enablement, and coaching. And I guess the first thing I always think of when I think of kind of frontline managers is the coaching and the one-on-ones, right? Which is typically where a lot of this stuff happens. So I guess, Jacob, let's maybe start with you. Like, how have your one-on-ones changed with your team members with AI? What are you using it for? How has that made you a better sales manager, a better sales leader? And then how has that also helped with the impact that you're able to have with your coaching to your reps?
Yeah, I think coaching has been one of the biggest game changers for me with AI. Before AI, the one-on-ones were very much like, hey, tell me about this deal. Where does it stand? Because you're not really trusting the data in the CRM or it's not even there, right? So there's a lot of Q&A and prying to get the right information so you can do deal strategy for a forecasting call. So you're really spending like 30 minutes of your one-on-one, almost spending 20 minutes trying to just get the right information or knowledge you need to actually understand where the deal stands and what best actions to drive it forward. I think now with AI, because you have very objective and accurate data, you're spending the whole 30 minutes purely on execution, what needs to happen to win this deal versus just asking reps questions to catch up, right? So the efficiency and the effectiveness of a one-on-one has, in my opinion, really drastically improved. And then from a coaching perspective is like getting insights on your reps to scale, right? Taking something like MedPick or something like a very custom framework, you're now able to score all of your deals, but also score all of your calls from a coaching perspective. So if I can understand that one of my reps is really struggling, an economic buyer, I can see over their last 20 or 30 opportunities, they're averaging a 2.6 out of 5 on identifying the economic buyer, and that's the lowest on our team. When I'm having a coaching session with the rep, I'm going to very much focus on how to properly identify an economic buyer and use calls I know scored low for that as my springboard for coaching versus having to do a lot of research myself of listening to a bunch of calls, which even still, if I listen to like 15 calls for a rep, it's not statistically significant of all of their conversations to actually know where they're weak. So for me, I'm way more effective, right? Because I'm operating off of 100% of the data to know where someone doing well and where they're weak and where are actually those exact moments that are coachable and learning moments from those conversations that we can improve. So for me, coaching with AI has been fundamentally changed.
Yeah. And Jeremy, is that, I guess, similar, different, kind of the same to what you've seen from the sales team and the impact on sales managers at Abridge?
I think what this does is just allow the managers to have a way better detection mechanism to figure out what things they need to be paying attention to. One thing that we're trying to push ahead right now is to how to really leverage attention as that like context engine for the organization to like auto generate. Like here's what we believe is a great one-on-one between a rep and a manager. How do we then auto populate those things for the managers that we go to execute against? So for each rep, it's like here are the things that you're working on as a part of the quarter. Here's what you're pacing towards your goal. Here are the things that you do really well. Here are the things that not. And then each week kind of generate and look back for examples, opportunities for improvement, identify the key opportunities by risk factors, by opportunities, both from a forecasting perspective and a pipeline perspective, to really make the most out of that time that they have together and allow there to be some type of common language that both the rep and manager know what to expect when they go into these meetings. I think there's a really great opportunity here to advance this further and to make these. I think that it's probably there's a wide spectrum of what an efficient one-on-one looks like between a rep and a manager. And I think there's an opportunity to make them a lot more effective and impactful in terms of what the rep could actually do with that information.
Yeah, you're actually that's brilliant, and it's one of the I think that's the first time I've heard that specific use case called out because at least for me, I think I've just kind of taken that for granted that coaches, managers know how to manage, know how to coach, right? But in this case, right, you're talking about like coach the coach, right? Like there's a good example of what a one-on-one looks like, and let's leverage that so that both sides, right, the manager and the AE know what that looks like and can get better at making the most efficient use of their time. What are some of the most common and frequently used workflows or summaries that your managers rely on, say, every week? Like, what are the things that they're doing on a weekly basis with AI that are impacting the way that they manage and kind of coach their team?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we have is just really focusing on onboarding and ramping reps. So understanding like, okay, let's make sure we're dialed in to that any customer call they're on that we're paying attention to and tracking. I think that is a pretty big shift because we can really dynamically say, here are the calls you must watch, manager, to make sure that the reps are ramping appropriately. From existing and ramped reps perspective, I think it's being able to be more effective with their time because they can really quickly isolate the deals that need attention or are riskiest. I think the other thing that has been pretty great is just the ability to synthesize and summarize like, huge swaths of information to be more prepared, like as they move into not just one-on-ones, but even forecasting calls. Like there's no excuse now for a manager not to be prepared and fully read into like what's happening in their book of business. And I think it's made a huge like our forecasting calls have just changed dramatically because there's less like, oh, let me follow up about that deal. It's
Yeah.
like the expectation now is that there is no excuse. Everyone should know everything that's going on. And that
Yeah.
allows us to be really more thoughtful and dialed in terms of forecasting accuracy.
Yeah. Jacob, what would you add to that? And I have a follow-up question for you too, Jacob.
Yeah, I think for me, like deal prioritization is also really helpful. Like when you're going into a forecast call, like how do you know the right deals to talk about? And I think that's where deal scoring has become like instrumental for us, where we're able to not only take our like sales like framework and methodology like a medic, but also layer in things that we know make a good opportunity, like very specific. Like, right, that's like very specific to us and no one else. So what I'm left with is a score and an opportunity out of 100 of like, how good of a deal is this for attention, right? So when I'm going to a call, I can see that, hey, this deal scored an 83, right? It has a high dollar amount tied to it. I want to prioritize talking about this opportunity first. And I can also get risk signals based off of these scores, right? So I'm very proactively flagged of like, here are your best deals. Here are the risks associated to them. So it leads to a lot more productive conversation with the reps and also gives me more visibility into forecasting more accurately. Because a rep might have a really large deal with a really low score that they're talking, like they have, very big happy years for.
Yeah.
And really go and pressure test that, right? And show like both through validation of AI and then like that, letting that be a flag for me to then go manually like check that it's not actually a good deal. So there's been a lot
Yeah.
of value in that as well. Plus just like proactively like getting a Slack message of like, hey, this deal's in commit and it's missing X, Y, and Z. Like you should be aware. So there's both like reactive of doing my own research and like pushing me in the right direction and proactive of like automatically flagging to me, risks and big deals.
Yeah. And Jacob, I'm going to ask you this question because I think, Jeremy, you have the benefit of obviously working at a technology company, AI-driven technology company, right? So culture around AI very different at a company like that versus, I don't know, pick a more traditional, maybe non-technology. Mark asked this question of a pushback that they've had from leadership is not wanting to rely on AI to make so many decisions. For example, saying a deal is dead when maybe it's not. So how should operators be thinking about presenting a, call it business case or communicating value around AI technology and tooling? Like Jacob, that you've seen from maybe customers that have been in situations like that, prospects you've talked to, like what's the best way to get the leadership team over the hump?
Yeah, I think how we look at it is like you shouldn't like, especially when it comes to deal health. I don't think it's like the end all be all for AI. Like if AI says a deal is dead, I don't think the rep should just go blindly close loss it. I think there should still be some conversation around it. It's a good stress test for a manager to then have a conversation with the rep. I think ultimately what you find is that it ends up being very, very accurate and points you in the right direction of deals that are either dead or about to be dead. So I think when it comes to leadership, it's more of like an added visibility to start, right? It's giving you all of this context across your operations and your business and your deals that you've never had before, right? And that visibility will ultimately lead to better decision making about opportunities, making your reps more productive, right? Not like think people's biggest fear is their reps working deals that never had a chance to close in the first place. Like I'm a believer that you should almost be disqualifying more than you should be qualifying.
100%.
So like, how do you live in a world where you're able to get that knowledge to then say to your rep, like, hey, are you actually working a disqualified opportunity, right? So I think for before it becomes this like autonomous agent that's like operationally driving change across your business, like marking an opportunity closed lost in the CRM, it first acts as this like extra pane of visibility, giving you the additional context to make smarter decisions that you can still have human in the loop to validate or justify in either direction.
Yeah. Yeah, like, go to the deal is dead example, right? If you see a deal has a low score, maybe there's been no activity on it for how long, and then you ask the rep about, and they're like, oh no, I've been texting back and forth with that person, like nonstop. It's like, oh, okay, well, then that indicates that you've got some communication data, obviously, that's not making its way back into your CRM. But if you just automatically closed anything that has a score below a certain threshold, those are things you can be missing out on, which I think goes back to the evaluate the risk, right? Low, medium, kind of high risk. But then also, none of these examples we've talked about have really been anything, I'll say, autonomous. It's all about how do you use them in conjunction with the human whose job it is and making them more efficient, better. So in that case, right, like there's a deal highlighted. Jacob has a conversation with the person on his team. Like you completely diagnose and get past that. And now you can also stand that up and strongly support that in your next forecasting call, right? Those are all things that can happen where in a pre-AI world that would take a lot longer figure out. So I guess, Jeremy, do you have any specific kind of things to add on that one before we move on to the leadership piece of this?
I'm still just getting over the heartburn of having an AI close lost any opportunity in my system automatically, but obviously I think that probably depends on the segment, but
Yeah.
not something I'd recommend.
All right. So we talked a little bit about individual contributors, reps, the managers. Now let's talk a little bit about the strategic and kind of leadership level impact. So, Jacob, I'll kind of go back to you to start on this. How are you and say the leadership team at Attention using AI to better understand what's working and what isn't?
Yeah, like I don't think the concept of voice of customer is anything new to anyone. I think everyone's always seen voice of customer as this really powerful mechanism. But the way in which people historically would get voice of customer was typically having some panel or committee or internal feedback loop, right? And that ends up being the loudest rep, right? Or the loudest manager. And it's super siloed and it's not always representative of all of your conversations and all of your customers and all of your prospects. So I think for us, where we see the biggest advantage is kind of this concept of insights to scale, right? Where you're getting data custom to your business over all of your interactions, like all of your calls, all of your emails. So when you're looking at, what are our top objections, it's not just one AE saying, hey, I'm hearing this a lot, right? It's actually looking over all of your conversations, all of your deals, and saying, this is your top objection. This is what has come up the most over all of your interactions and be able to get access to that data, right? So for us, it's been really game changing to help focus our reps and enable them a lot stronger because we have this data that's really clear that's saying, hey, here's why you're losing deals to this competitor. They're undercutting you on price and they've recently been talking about this functionality your prospects have. So for us, it's like proactively being flagged, kind of these insights to scale off of all of our interactions that have been extremely useful as we continue to shape our go-to-market.
And what about you, Jeremy? How do you and kind of the leadership team, obviously you're VP of RevOps, you're chief of staff to the chief commercial officer. How are you all using AI to better understand what's working and what's not?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most underleveraged pieces of data within an organization is their customer conversations. I think most people just try to get the most basic, but there's so much you can do with that, particularly around weaving together feedback from a product perspective, from a competitive intel perspective, even just starting to assess how is our messaging working. Those are things that I often feel like you can start to pull out either looking at sentiment, but just looking at what the customers are saying across your entire footprint. Some of the things that we love the most right now is to analyze what are the questions that are most commonly coming up and when are they coming up, so we can better tailor that into our sales process to like bring that in and make sure that they're being addressed, or even just help to build whatever content we're going to have. So if customers are asking, well, how do you measure XYZ thing in terms of ROI, we can start to think through, okay, here's a common question that's being asked across our footprint. Let's work on some content we can put together that would help address this. Another thing that's been really helpful, particularly as we release new products, is just better synthesize and tee up feedback from customers on that product to our product team. So anytime a new product gets mentioned, it'll analyze the sentiment, what was discussed, what questions were asked, how they viewed it, which is super helpful in terms of getting that feedback directly into product's hands. I think it's been
Yeah.
something that has helped accelerate just those product feedback loops that are so important.
Yeah. And Jeremy, follow-up question, I guess for you as an operator, Patrick asked this in the chat. How should people be thinking about adopting AI functionality as it relates to, say, existing tools like their CRM that, has been around for ages, that is deploying, call it AI features or AI capabilities versus adopting newer companies leading innovative, AI kind of native companies, products like Attention, for example, that are, kind of AI native, built for specific use cases around, say sales, marketing, customer success. How do you as an operator think about that and those differences if you think about it at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly depends on the use case. I think you really have to take a step back and think about what is this software's core competency? Like, are they actually focused on AI workflows? Are they actually focused on making this really great? Or are they treating this as a commodity that they're just going to try to make as cheap as possible? Those are like two different views of the world in terms of what the use and the value of the product that you're going to get from. So I really just think you need to spend time thinking about what is the direction, what is their core competency, and what is the value of the output that is going to come from something like that. For
Mhm.
us, it felt like, there's just so much you can do with like your calls and your email, and all your customer contacts that like, I don't trust Salesforce to go execute against that. If anyone could explain to me like what actually Agentforce is, got good luck to them, because it feels like the the biggest BS ever. But, I think that we need to think through like who are the companies that you pick and like what are they actually doing with it?
Yeah. And I always, for Patrick and anybody else, I always start with the problem of what are you trying to solve for, right? And then move on to solution. And from there, you have a variety of technology that will be available to you. But I also want to call it the technology is not the only answer, and it's not always the right answer to help you with things. So just consider, right, problem first, solution second. And I'm going to end. I have one more question for both of you. Jacob, I'm going to start with you on this one. And then just shout out to Connor on your team for kind of putting this in the question bank because I love this. If I told you that I had to remove one AI powered workflow that you're leveraging today, which one would hurt the most if I told you I was taking it away and you could no longer leverage it and you had to go back to the old way before?
That is a really good question. I have this AI powered chatbot that overlays all of our customer interactions, so emails and calls, and also overlays our CRM, right? So I can ask questions of like, which opportunities over X amount of ACV are most at risk. So it can go into my Salesforce. It can pull all of my open opportunities in a certain stage for a greater than amount. And it can go into all the conversations and emails, give me the next steps and find all the risks associated to that. It's also great for like RevOps work, right? Like we're going through a segmentation exercise right now. Instead of building a bunch of different Salesforce reports, I can just ask like, hey, what are our conversion rates for sales teams between, 100 and 500 employees? And it can use all of the data in the CRM, and then it can find information from conversations to validate like PMF and all of these different things that I used to have to then just manually build Salesforce reports and then manually go into conversations to validate and get context. So for me, that is just like made me way more effective and given me access to information that I've never had before. And also just makes me way more efficient and takes away work that like I'm not traditionally great at, right? So this ability to just like interact with my Salesforce and conversations and emails and other systems at once has been the most game changing. And if I lost that tomorrow, I'm not quite sure what I would do.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jeremy, same question for you, but I guess I'd be curious on your answer from two different perspectives. So like one is how would you answer that as an operator based on like what would be the most painful thing, AI driven workflow that I could take away from you? And I'd be curious, is that the same that say your sales team or any of the teams you support on say the chief commercial side, would they give the same answer or would they give a different answer?
Going back to manually creating your own prep sheets for your executives or like sales engineer, whoever is going to be joining a call would be super tedious. Like the ability to quickly tee up all the right information about what matters really quickly so that whoever you're bringing into the customer call is fully prepared. I think that's a huge time saver, especially when you think about like sales handoff components, like making sure all that's put in. For me, particularly, the thing that would hurt the most, kind of two things. Like, number one, it's incredibly nice to be able to have it synthesize a large piece of information about a particular topic. So, hey, how did this particular product, as we've been thinking about it, like, tell me all the different customers that we've met with about it and what they say. To like get that so quickly that would normally take a week to be able to synthesize all information would be so painful in terms of how we would move more quickly. I think really been a game changer in terms of like what we can actually pull and grab from just like a couple prompts on the data set has been pretty mind blowing. And the way that it feeds it in too, we asked, hey, tell me about how this new rep performing, and it would go through all different areas, like the particular calls. It's insane.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think part of that too is you got to kind of throw some maybe preconceived notions or maybe baggage is a better word out of the window of like, that example you gave before. Like I know rewind 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I've had that same question of like, man, I wish I would know how many times we've talked about this thing to like a group of prospects. And I'm just like, never going to figure that out. I'm not
Yeah.
even going to try. Those are things that you can solve for now, right? Continue to actually try to execute on those things and don't just assume that you can no longer do them. So I love that. Well, guys, we're basically at time. And so I want to first say thank you very much for dropping some knowledge on everyone today. This was great. I know I learned a ton, and I'm sure our audience did as well. To everyone out there, thank you very much. I will see you at the next one. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.